All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, how are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Had a nice weekend. Got the dogs out on a hike, so definitely kicked our butts there. Got out into nature. It was nice. It was a nice,
That's
relaxing
awesome.
weekend.
Yeah.
Looking forward to Memorial Day weekend for sure.
Yeah, me and the girlie went kayaking this last weekend, and we hadn't done that
Oh,
ever since we met, and I haven't done that in years and years. And I'll tell you, my shoulders are still feeling it.
no, that's an experience, bro. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. We're gonna talk playoffs in the NBA and just kind of discuss how we were wrong again, and just looking ahead into these conference finals matchups. Obviously, the Pacers and Celtics are going on right now as we speak, tied at halftime. So we'll see how this one ends up playing out. Um, and after that, I personally have some draft names for the Kings. So for Kings fans out there who want to get an idea of who could be there or who my favorite targets are, we're going to talk about that at the end. So let's start with the second round series that we thought we were going to, we thought we were going to be right on both the Denver series and the New York series, but we'll start with
Yeah.
New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers. So the Pacers advanced, and obviously it's a product of the Knicks literally running out of players to use. Um, I don't know if you had any like major takeaways. Like, how was this for the Pacers in your opinion? Like, did you think I don't know how to feel because like you play who's in front of you. Congrats on them for advancing this far, but like why couldn't it be us?
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part is that when the Kings made the playoffs last year, we ran into the Steph Curry wall, who was healthy, he was pumped up, ready to go, he wasn't tired, and we ended up tiring him out, and so the Lakers got him when he was worn down. But it's frustrating from a standpoint of why couldn't it be us, right? That has that kind of a playoff run where just everything kind of falls into place. But you've also you still gotta show up to every single game. You gotta play ball. You've gotta, play your best game. I mean, every team who's in the playoffs is in the playoffs for a reason. Indy really positioned themselves pretty well this year, and put themselves in a position where they could go on a playoff run if everything fell into their hands, and it did. And on the other side, look at the Knicks. Yeah, they're banged up. Yeah, they had injuries like no other, but you also got to look at, well, why did they get injured? Well, as you and I have talked about, how much does Tom Thibodeau play his guys? Like, and that's a major aspect to why the Knicks playoff run ended as quickly as it did.
Yeah, I think, when you think back on this series in particular, the couple big things that stand out was game 3, Andrew Nembhard hitting that ridiculous 3 to put him away.
Yeah.
Had that not happened, the Knicks would have gone up 3-0, and no one's ever come back from 3-0. It could have been a completely different season. So you look at that, and then the fact that the Knicks couldn't hit anything, and the Pacers hit every single shot that they took, like in Game 7.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of nuts. Like obviously it was the highest scoring percentage in a Game 7 by a team in NBA history. So literally could not have played any better. And listen, like you show up when it matters the most, and sometimes everything just goes your way. And it was the basketball gods really playing in favor of Indiana. And they were the first of 2 road teams to win Game 7 on the road in NBA history, since the Wolves ended up doing that as well. So it's just weird. This year in general has been really weird, but shout out to the Pacers. They stepped up when they did, and when they needed to, and now they get to go as close to full strength as they can against the Boston Celtics. So
Yeah, and I mean, there's also no denying the Pacers are a well-built team. I don't think they're, out of the teams left in the playoffs, I personally think they're the worst built team, but that's kind of saying, rather that's not saying too much, considering you're looking at the Mavericks, you're looking at the Timberwolves, you're looking at teams that just from an aspect of their starting five, and then looking at their benches, like New York didn't really have much of a bench per se. They
right.
had guys who were always next man up mentality, right? which is dangerous to have. But looking at these remaining teams, like, looking at the Celtics, looking at the Mavs, looking at the Timberwolves, like I said, like, those teams have depth. And that's something that, like, at this point in the season, you're looking at injuries. You're looking at guys who are needing to step up in certain roles that maybe you weren't expecting them to or needing them to originally, or maybe it's just you need them to step up more than usual. And you're going to have more success doing that when you have a deeper team like them. But looking at the Pacers, like, they're not that deep. They're not as deep as those other three teams. And so I'm a little concerned, especially with this matchup against the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics are coming in with a banged up Kristaps Porzingis, who probably won't be available at least until game 4. And that's even going to be pushing it from kind of what I'm understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But the Celtics are still a deep team. I mean, that bench is not only a next man up mentality, but it's also deep. It's also got a really well coached, unit. Like, the Celtics are a very, very good team.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, yes, the Pacers, as you and I are talking right now, are up on the Celtics. Look, if the Pacers take game 1, I'm still going to say that the Celtics have a very, very good shot at winning this series because depth comes into play, especially this late in the season and this late in a playoff run.
And it's going to matter, like, Tyrese has played well in the games that they've won, but he needs to maintain a level of consistency too, right? Like,
Right.
Siakam's going to have to play perfect if they really want to win this series too, because you never know if Tyrese has shown that he's not willing to go off every single game in a playoff series. So that's going to be interesting to see. And who knows if, especially against like the Boston Celtics, it's almost like how the Kings were against the Warriors last year. You run into a team that's so similar in style to you. Yeah, the Pacers had the number 1 offense, but the Celtics had the number 2 offense, and they play the exact same way. They just get out and run, shoot threes. Like, that's all they do. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised, like, for the Celtics too, it works the same way. Like, they're in the season series, they played 5 games against each other, very similar because of the in-season tournament, and the Celtics won 3-2. So it's like, Indy kept it competitive. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think it's going to be as big as a pushover as people think it is, because Boston,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they've gotten a lot more rest, but obviously Kristaps is hurt, and that will affect them too. But like, Indy has kind of gone through it together with these guys. This core have kind of
Yeah.
fought back from these obstacles that teams like the Celtics haven't faced yet. So it'll be interesting to see if that adversity that Indiana has faced helps them in this series. So for sure.
And they've faced that adversity throughout this entire playoff run. I mean, nobody really inked them in as their winner in any of these series. So I think they've kind of fed off that energy, which is very Kings-esque of last year, not this season, but the season before. And that's, look, when you are fueled off of, expectations being against you, that's dangerous. And we've seen it in almost any sport. Like, when your back's against the wall, you kind of have nothing to lose. And so it's like you're going to give everything you have. Not that the Celtics aren't going to, but you can almost count on the Pacers giving everything they have and a little bit more to at least pick up as many of these games as possible and put themselves in a position for a game 7, right? And that's all you can ask is either win the series outright or position yourself for a game 7 where you've taken them the entire distance, a team who nobody is thinking you guys are going to beat, and you've taken them that distance, and now you've got a chance to beat them. Then that's like, the Celtics have everything to lose and the Pacers would have nothing to lose, and that's scary.
Right, and that's a great point, because the Celtics do have this kind of weight on their shoulders from, they've been one of the most successful teams in the Eastern Conference over the past 7 years, making it to the conference finals 5 times, making it to the finals once. But that's the problem. They've had all this success and nothing to show for it. And in a year where, just like everything kind of fell in place for Indiana to get to this point, everything has fallen in place for Boston, where all of their biggest demons have already gone under the rug. So, and when you look at it, like, I have this thing on just a bunch of stats on the 2023-24 Celtics as to why the expectations are even higher. So obviously they had the NBA's best record. They won the Eastern Conference by 14 games. That's the largest NBA conference differential since 1976. They have an 11.34 scoring margin, fifth best in NBA history. 15.2 scoring margin at home, third best in NBA history. 1.2 points per possession, best offense in NBA history. They have the second most threes in NBA history in a season.
Mm-hmm.
They've won or tied the season series with 28 of 29 teams, with Denver being the only team that they lost the series to. And they clinched the playoff spot 17 days before any other team. They have had this they've just cooked this whole season. And with all the stars kind of aligning, it does beg the question, if not this year, when? And you've come out and said that this is the Celtics year, that they have a better chance than any team. But we'll switch on over here to the Western Conference, because there is a real possibility for the Celtics that they might run into. I think people would, when we talk about the Mavericks advancing from OKC and Minnesota advancing from Denver, there's a real possibility where the winner of the Western Conference might be the favorite going into the finals, especially depending on Kristaps' health and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the one series I was actually correct in this entire time, was OKC losing to the Mavs, and it was a good series. I think out of the Western Conference, actually out of the whole second round, it was the most consistent in terms of these games. That's another thing. Some of these games and a lot of these series have been kind of stinkers.
Yeah.
Blowouts after blowouts, and then the close games have been epic and super close and awesome. But Luka and Kyrie did a really good job. I also, obviously, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, they really stepped up.
PJ's been phenomenal for them lately.
And I think it's an outlier. He's been good, but he hasn't been this good. He's stepping up at the right time. So he will be the X factor going into this series against the Wolves. It's going to be, if he can keep up that shooting, it's going to make them more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And this matchup's going to be fun because obviously you have the whole Anthony Edwards of it all versus the whole Luka of it all. And that's going to be these are two of the best young players in the league. And that's the case now that Denver's been knocked out. So with the OKC series, I thought it was highly contested. OKC played their hearts out. Shea did everything he could.
No.
But Kyrie really stepped up again. And that's where I'm thinking that veteran presence, Kyrie's the kind of veteran presence who can change games.
Yeah.
And Luka playing hobbled still. I wonder with, how fresh is he going to be the rest of these playoffs? That will be something that's lingering the whole time, but that hasn't seemed to slow down this team. So I was impressed with Dallas in that last series. And listen, I don't like Dallas. I don't like talking about Dallas like this, but they have been freaking impressive throughout this run, despite the challenges. They've had a tough road.
Yeah, and that road started coming out of the All-Star break. I mean, they really flipped a gear coming out of that All-Star break. It was really impressive to see because, when we were talking about, positions, going into the last run there, we expected the Mavs to be there, but I mean, we're homers. We thought that the Kings would beat them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they seriously not only, distanced themselves from us and our pack, but they commandingly took that. And they were running teams off the court. They made it all the way up to fifth place, ended fifth in the West. It was impressive to see their run last as long as it did. And it wasn't just a Cinderella story type run, and they weren't just playing easy teams the whole time. Did they have an easier schedule? Yeah. But the easier games that they were running, they ran those teams off the court. It wasn't even close. And then when it came to the tough games, I think they had a game against the Celtics in there. And I don't remember if it was the Celtics. I apologize. I don't know for sure, but there was a tough top team in there, and they took it to them. And it was oh, okay, the Mavs are here. This is the no joke team. And since game one, really, of the playoffs, they have been the exact same team, if not even more dominant. And if there's a time to turn it on, I'd rather do it now than at the beginning of a season. 10 times out of 10.
For sure. And it begs the question, like, Dallas is set up for the future now with some of these young guys and the trade pieces working out. And they took a couple risks at the trade deadline and it worked out in their favor. And that's just how it is. And that's how I'll view it, because it's good business. They took a chance. And that's what happened last year when they low key tanked to miss the playoffs when Luka was still struggling and Kyrie was hurt too. And they ended up with Derek Lively, and look how that turned out. He was one of the biggest, differences in that series, off the bench, and he will continue to play a role. So it'll be interesting to see when we talk about like guys like Luka and Kyrie. There's an argument to be made that they are the best duo remaining in this playoff field. And it's weird that I say that because, I think off the top, I almost feel like it would be Tatum and Brown. But it's interesting because when you watch the Celtics, they're just like, there's a level of inconsistency there. Yeah. And with Luka and Kyrie, you kind of almost know what you're getting every night. And if one guy falters, the other guy's there to pick him up. So it'll be interesting to see if the Mavs can hang with this pesky Wolves team that I think not only took the NBA by storm, but I think has very quickly become the NBA's kind of darling team because of the Ant-Man over there. So
yeah,
let's talk about the Denver series. I was pretty confident that Denver was gonna, kind of do their thing. And 24 hours after we spoke about it, they lost by 45 in Game 6. So, and then followed that up by being up by 20 in Game 7, and then losing by 8 points. But they got outscored by what, 30? Like, yeah. It was insane. So, I think if this tells me anything, I think it's that, good job by the Wolves for just kind of giving you that FU mentality and just not backing down when their back's against the wall. And they have that nice mix of veteran presence versus young, just star talent. And at the end of it, it looked like the Nuggets just kind of gave up. Like, they gave up 2 really crucial offensive boards at the end there when they were trying to make, hold on. So what to you stuck out the most from Denver losing or Minnesota winning?
For me, honestly, this series was won 100% based off of just hunger. You talked about those last 2, offensive rebounds. Well, it was so much deeper than that. Yeah, that sealed the game. But, dude, there were so many plays in that entire series where it was like the Wolves are just hungrier. The Wolves are just hungrier. Like, they actually came to play tonight. You win a freaking playoff game by 45 points. Like, that's saying something. That's kind of eye-opening, especially as a defending champs. It's like, how hungry are you to get back there and do the same thing? Do you want to repeat? Do you even want to be here right now? Like, I know the Lakers didn't tire them out. At least I'm sitting here on my couch saying that. I don't know that for sure, but I didn't get the sense that the Lakers were an exhausting series for them, right? And that was a series before. It's like, it's frustrating to me when you go 5 games in round 1 and you go into a matchup against a Timberwolves team who had played 1 less game than you. So the rest advantage, not really a thing. And you kind of sit down through the whole series. And it was almost like they were trying to coast. It was like they knew that they were going to win, from the very beginning. Even when they went down to 2-0, it was like, we're fine. Like, we got this. We'll come back. We'll be fine. We're the defending champs. This is Minnesota. This is still Minnesota. No.
Right. And I wonder, so kind of like how we talked about the Celtics not really dealing with any adversity during this run, that was kind of the Nuggets last year. Like, everything kind of fell in place for them. They were winning each series in 4 or 5. They swept the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals before beating the Heat in the finals in 5. So it's like, they never ran into any adversity. And this was the first series with the team that's like, hey, we're coming and we're going to take this from you. Right. And you can tell how Jamal Murray getting flustered and the they were just throwing them out of their rhythm the whole time, and Denver just looked like the inferior team, which is crazy to say considering they had the MVP on their team. And Jokic, he did everything he could in that situation. I don't think he played bad by any means, but the rest of the team, they just did such a good job of holding it down. Karl Anthony Towns stepped up really well. Rudy Gobert has been playing well. Jaden McDaniels, obviously. And it comes down to depth again. Like, Denver decided not to, re-sign Bruce Brown. Like, he would have been really useful in this series. And, you got guys like Christian Braun, who was kind of like afraid to take a shot when it mattered. And that's just, Denver kind of fell apart. And they now enter the offseason with a lot more questions than answers, because in this league, it's starting to become more apparent that there's no true dynasty here. And Minnesota is in an optimal position here, because I think it's going to be a tale of like two different kind of styles with Minnesota and Dallas, because, on the one side, you got Luka and Kyrie, who are very heliocentric, and they're going to dominate the possession themselves, versus the Wolves, who just spread it out, even with Ant. And Ant's not dominating all the shots in there. He's moving the ball around. It's very within the flow of the offense. They're more of a team, if that makes sense. But Dallas, it plays as a team, and those other guys just make their shots and defend well and hustle. So it'll be very interesting with this series, who kind of moves on, because I'm feeling really confident that either one of these teams in the Western Conference can go out there, and if the Celtics advance, like, they might, like, the Wolves especially could give the Celtics a run for their money because of the size that they offer, right? Like, they're one of the only teams that can compete with Boston in terms of their size, yet speed and athleticism. And I think everybody, I don't know. I just feel like the world is kind of backing up Minnesota right now. Me personally, I want to see Dallas win this series. I think the best player remaining in the playoffs is in Dallas. So it would be very interesting to see if Luka and them will be able to make that push. I think if Luka wins this series, if the Mavs win this series, considering how everyone feels about the Wolves right now, I think that'll only further cement Luka as kind of like that guy moving forward, at least in front of like the young guys, if that makes sense.
It's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about that earlier today, actually. Like, I was actually more so thinking who the best player in this matchup is on that court. And I'm thinking, I'm like, all right, Luka's on one side. He's way up there. You got Kyrie, and then on the other side, you've got Ant-Man, and then, you got Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert. But it really does come down to Luka and Ant. And it's like, at any given time, either one of those guys has shown in the playoffs and has shown before that they can just flip a switch and completely shift a game. And shifting a game can shift a series in this case. And it's, the home court advantage is going to play a factor for sure. But I don't know. I'm curious to see, like, if Dallas picks up one of the first, 2 games in mini, this could be a really, really interesting series. Because I think if this is kind of like me getting into who I think is going to win. So I don't know if we're ready to talk about that.
Oh no, I'm here for it.
All right. So I have this feeling that if Minnesota picks up both games at home in games 1 and 2, that they will probably pick up another game in Dallas. And from there, like, Dallas will probably win a couple more and make it like a 3-3 game. I think it'll go 7 games. I really do. This is a really, really good matchup, and I'm actually super excited for it. I'm not going to be the one who calls this. I'm going to leave it to you for the behind the back sake of things, because my calls were atrocious last round. But I'm stoked, and I do see a scenario where Minnesota wins. I see a scenario where Dallas wins, and all of it comes down to who wins at the other person's house for me. That's really what it comes down to me.
No, that's a great point. I do think so. If I had to pick, I'm going to ruin everything. I'm going to say Dallas in 7. That's what my gut's telling me.
Yeah.
And just like you, I can see a world where both teams are they could totally advance. One of them can dominate the other. It could happen for both of these teams, but I do think that what makes both of these teams so interesting is just their stylistic differences, and how will that show out in the actual playoff series? I'm not sure. So that's what
Yeah.
I wanted. Like, we wanted to do this pod before that series because obviously, like, Boston and Indy are going to be a great series, but like, I wanted to talk about this like before it happens because this is kind of the series. I think it's starting to turn on everybody that the winner of this series might be the winner of the NBA Finals. And let me ask you a question here, we can elude this. If you actually first, who would you pick? Since I did the West, who would you pick for Boston and Indy?
Boston in 6.
Boston in 6. Okay, no, that's good. I do think Indy's going to give them a little bit more fight, given all that they've been through. But I also don't think that's a I don't think that's a knock on the Celtics to like win in 6. Like, I don't think everyone expects them to dominate and like win the series, but I mean, you win in 6, like face a little adversity on the way to the finals, like that's great.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, because I kind of made my point of like who I think is the best player in the playoffs. Who do you think is the best player in the playoffs in your opinion that's remaining? Do you believe like, or maybe who has the most pressure? Like, is it Tatum? Is it Doncic? Is it Anthony Edwards? Is it Tyrese? Like, who kind of has the most to lose, or who do you think will make the most of impact?
I think the most to lose is probably Luka because he's been here to the Western Conference Finals twice before.
I think it was
Was
once.
only once.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he got here, but he's been close. But I mean, he's had to carry.
He's been close many times, but yeah, he's carried time and time again. And I do think like Luka's got the most to lose in this case because he's going to keep knocking on that door now for yet another year and make it so far and then get eliminated. And he's going to have Kyrie with him. He's going to be questioning, like, he's not going to probably question if he's the problem, but he's going to be like looking around the room going, what's going on here? Something's not adding up. I thought this was the team that could actually, give us that solid run. And mind you, it's still a solid run, but I think Luka's probably, to me, the player with the most to lose. And I'd be curious to ask you the same question, but in terms of who I think the best player left is, if we're going by right now, at this moment, I think it's Anthony Edwards. And
wow,
dude is on fire. Like, there is an aura around him of confidence that is just, it's not only good for him and his play, but it's rubbing off on his team. And that whole Minnesota team is just on an absolute rampage right now. And I talked about being, backs against the wall, yada, yada, yada with the Pacers. Nah, if there's a team that's got their backs against the wall, who's been counted out this entire season being a fraudulent number 1 team, I'll raise my hand because I said the same thing. It's been Minnesota all year long. And they've done nothing but prove everybody in the league and probably even themselves at times wrong. So there's a large amount of confidence on that team, and I think that confidence is rubbing off on Ant, which is why I would put him as the best player right now.
For me, I still think Doncic would be the best player. I think when it comes to who has the most to lose or like who is under the most pressure, I think it might actually be Tatum. And I know that Tatum's kind of like, just like Luka has been there, done that. But when you've gone to 5 Eastern Conference Finals and you've been to 1 Finals, and every single time, like, he's almost always been part of the reason why they don't advance. And he's talked about putting himself on that tier where he wants to be an MVP. And you go and you look at these other guys like Anthony Edwards, Luka, who actually are MVPs, and it's very interesting to see like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown work so well for each other, but they haven't done enough to get over the hump. So I think pressure wise, like, every year that they don't make it, it's the same conversation. Or are these two working together? Are we going to trade Jaylen? Like, what are we going to do here? So I just think that, like, for Celtics fans, like they're on the edge right now because like if like there's no if not now when? Like if not now when?
Yeah, and I totally get where you're coming from. What if you factor in, because for me, what I didn't mention and that I factored in was the um the mentality that Luka brings towards the game and the respect that he has for the game versus what Tatum brings. Like Luka is he comes across as toxic sometimes, you know, and it's rubbed off on his team. It's definitely rubbed off towards referees, and it's been reported multiple times throughout this year. Like there is a sigh of relief, which was recently submitted. There was a sigh of relief in that starting five when Luka is subbed off the floor because they can actually feel like they play some basketball. And whether that is true or not, when you're having those kind of reports, it begs the question of like, what are these guys feeling towards Luka? Is he really pressuring guys like that? Kobe pressured guys like that, but in a kind of a different way. Like he just demanded so much, you know, out of you at any given time. Luka's like, give me the ball, give me the ball, give me the ball, and do what I want. That way we can, you know, have the best chance to win because the ball is in my hands. And mind you, he is still a phenomenal playmaker, but if you can see it sometimes, like if he doesn't have the ball in his hands and it doesn't touch him a few times and somebody throws up some junk, he's upset. He's like throwing his arms around. He's just body language just isn't right. Tatum does a lot less of that. I'm not saying that he's perfect by any stretch, but if you factor those things in, does that change your opinion at all?
I think, you know, it's funny that you put it that way because when I look at how Tatum plays, he plays like he's Luka, but he doesn't have the same level of success that Luka does. Like he's out here jacking up sidestep 3-pointers and Tatum's just bricking them. Like he doesn't have the level of percentage or efficiency that Luka does. And then you pair that up with Jaylen Brown, who feels like I'm just about the same as Jason Tatum. And then it's like it creates like
Sure.
I versus like I agree with your Luka take that he can be kind of a prima donna and that he demands success. But then you have a guy like Kyrie who's kind of just like, I'm just here to hoop and I'm just here to put the ball in the bucket. And, you know, I I want my next LeBron to help carry me to another title and I'll just do my part. Um, like I just think the dynamic's a little better there. Um, so that's still like, and then again, like it's not just pressure from the fan base for Boston. I think it's pressure from each other. Like how many
It's
times
fair.
are you going to kick the door, like try to kick the door down and not make it, you know? And in the NBA, it seems like it's a little bit, I'm not going to say easier. It's never easy, but like versus like the NFL to like get there continuously. The Celtics have been knocking on the door of being a dynasty for years because they've been so consistently good, but they've never gotten over the hump. So it's like, what's the point?
Sounds so familiar. It hits really close to home. I don't
Yeah.
really know what team it is, but I don't know. Maybe they wear red and gold. I don't know.
Oh gosh. No, and like mentally as an athlete, it has to take a toll. Like they made
Yeah.
changes. They switched for Marcus Smart and put Drew Holiday. Like they make these kind of moves in hopes that like they can keep their core together. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll just be interesting to see. And then we talk about like how the NBA is going to be moving forward. And like I think it's been talked about now recently, especially with the Nuggets losing and not, they lost their back-to-back bid. Like, will who if whoever wins this title, what are the odds that they're going to go back to back? Like the parity in the NBA
Yeah.
has been insane. And this year's weird too because of all the injuries, like especially in the Eastern Conference. Like if Boston goes again next year and all these other teams stay healthy, what are the odds they actually advance? And the same in the West. Like let's say Dallas or Minnesota comes out of the West. Who's to say that there's not going to be 3 other teams in the West that are better than them next year? So it's
Right.
like teams are growing, injuries are happening. Like the parity in the league is kind of like as high as it's ever been before. I kind of love it personally because that means that our Kings have a chance. But like
Yeah.
it's interesting. Well, I don't know what you think about the parity or if you noticed really that difference.
I have, yeah. And I think a lot of it is to do with guys are switching teams like, you know, like they're switching underwear sometimes. They're requesting trades from teams and trying to build these low-key super teams, because we don't really have any super teams left in the league, which I am all for. Like,
Seriously.
I don't want a team full of 5 all-stars. I want, at the very most, give me 3 all-stars, like what you've got basically in Minnesota. Rudy's kind of an all-star. I kind of put him in there.
Defensive player of the year. That works.
Yeah, and absolutely, sure. But that super team stuff, throw it out the window, because when you don't have a super team, guess what? 6 years in a row, you're not going to have a repeater, and you're not going to have the for 6 years in a row, you're not going to have the defending champs make it past the second round.
Right.
And that kind of thing is special for the NBA, because it gives guys a chance. It gives them motivation. Like, you're looking at a team like the Kings. You're looking at a team like let's backtrack. Let's go to Detroit. Let's go to Charlotte. Like, teams that haven't been competitive now for years and years. Well, they're believing that at any given point they can be competitive, because they're seeing this trend of teams that get really good and then regress, and then teams that are regressing, like they start to get good. Like, it's that sense of like, we've got a chance any year. And that kind of thing is special. And then, yeah, obviously guys are starting to be more and more athletic, which means you have to play harder and harder to keep up with them. Injuries happen when you play harder and harder. And this whole sitting out thing, the league is almost got on a, like, almost got locked up, where they're starting to tick guys for, you're not going to get awarded if you don't play X amount of games, kind of thing.
I kind of like that.
That's a great thing for the league, because who the hell wants to pay a ridiculous amount of money to go see the Clippers play, and it's not even the freaking Clippers? Like,
right.
Kawhi's sitting out, Paul George is sitting out. No, like, I don't want to go pay money for that, but okay, I already paid money. Like, that kind of thing. Getting rid of that, and you're just seeing any year it's anybody's trophy. And that I like. I agree with you on. I just think with injuries factored in, with guys feeling like they've got a shot, like, it's special. I like it.
It kind of gives like an old school feel, like when you really think about it, because like back in the day, guys got dinged up and they're playing through it. Like, they don't care. Like, they want to be on the floor. So when you limit when you're getting all these awards and you have to be eligible, and when you get these awards, that's where you can get your pay raise from. So, like, for example, like Fox could have been eligible for like another Supermax extension had he made an All-NBA team this year. And how do you make an All-NBA team? You have to play 65 games. So that was the same thing, the argument that was made for Tyrese Halliburton. They're like, oh man, if Tyrese with the hamstring injury misses this many games, he's going to lose his opportunity to be an All-NBAer. That's what happened with Joel Embiid. Like, I understand Joel Embiid's a top 15 player, but he wasn't here all season. So this particular year, he didn't have the impact of a top 15 player. So those are the things that, like, I think in the long run, it's going to make a lot of these guys tougher. And you're going to see more of your stars more often. And that's better for the game. You're getting the names on the back of the jerseys, the ones that people buy, they want to see those people. So that's just, I'm all for that. So, but when it comes to the level of parity, like you said, like, we haven't had a back-to-back winner in 6 straight years now, and that's including this year. So, and it'll be interesting to see just the narrative that comes out of it. Like, even if the only team that I could say out of the 4 that are left, if the Celtics win the title, they're the most likely team to be like, oh, they'll definitely have another shot to repeat because they've been here so many times. But if a team like Dallas or a team like Minnesota wins the title, or Indy, they're going to be like, they had a special year, but they're not the favorite going into next year. That's just, they won the title, but there are other teams here that are going to contest. So that's where I kind of fall in that category. So it'll be interesting for sure. So I think the parity's nuts, but I love it personally.
Yeah, it's good for the league. It's good for fans too. It's giving them a chance to have something to root for. Game 1, you think your team's probably going to win the title because it's anybody's grab. So
right.
So we talked about the playoff matchups currently. We talked about how we think the Mavs are going to win in 7 games, and we talked about how the Celtics we think are going to win in 6. Right. So realistically, we'll be back here to talk about how the Timberwolves swept the Mavs and how the Pacers won in 7. But Um, but
Exactly.
I'm stoked, dude. I'm super excited for these series because as much as like I wasn't super high today on talking about the Pacers and Celtics series, it's still going to be competitive. Like these teams made it this far for a reason. They have shown up for every game. They've brought their best, and you're in the final stretch of the season. There's a time to bring everything you got and more. It's right now. So
Mhm.
these teams, when they understand what's at stake and they understand those kind of things, like these are well coached teams right now, and it's going to be fun. It really is. I'm so
I do think that the best four teams are remaining. And I say that for the Pacers because like the Knicks, they would have entered this series completely banged up and it wouldn't have been a series. So, and you alluded to that last week. You said, "Oh, when when the Knicks advance, their injuries are going to catch up to them," but it ended up happening last series. So,
yeah.
I think the best four teams are remaining, and they're great teams for their own reasons, and it's going to be a lot of drama. So, what's the update on the Pacers Boston score now?
Great question. Let me see. Oh my goodness, we've got a dandy out in Boston. It is 104 to 101 with 6 minutes left. Boston's up.
That's a banger. Jeez. Um, and obviously, like I wish like we could. Thank you NBA or all sports where we can't just stream it live and react with everybody
Yeah.
on there. Um, but no, like this is going to be a good series. Like I think 6 is a good place to put it. I think if Boston loses tonight, it's going to be like their wake up call. They've lost one game at home to every series so far, and everyone gets
Yep.
mad at them like, "Oh, you should have won both," and then they end up winning in 5. So it's like, what are
Mm-hmm.
we doing here? So I think that's enough playoff talk for now. Hopefully we come back next week, like Ben said, and hopefully we're not completely dead wrong. But are you ready to hear some of these draft names that I have for the
Hit
Kings?
me with them, brother.
Okay, so I kind of went a little overboard, and I went ahead and made our Behind the Back podcast big board. And this is not a final product by any means. This was just from what I gathered from post combine, and I leveled 6 dudes just as a preview. So out of these 6 dudes, I took 2 from each section, and how I go about like picking players, and I do the same thing in the NFL too, but obviously the NBA is just 2 rounds. I do guys in the second round because the Kings have a pick at 45, which is a nice spot in the second round. So I have a group called second round studs. So guys who I think they could take at 45, have a nice potential role on this team. They could make an impact right away, a la Keon Ellis. And then I got my fringe favorites, guys who are late first, early second round talents that like I really like personally and that make a ton of sense. But the problem is in the consensus, it will kind of be a reach for Sac, and or they wouldn't be available by the time we pick them in the second round. And then my last pick is Sacramento's ideal prospects. Those are guys who have been rumored towards us, who are falling right in our range that make the most sense. And I've been kind of looking at Monty McNair's history, and it's been a short one with Sac. He hasn't drafted that many guys for us, but kind of the style of guys that he would go for, and I think that would make the most sense. And also, there's a bit of personal touch, who I think makes the most sense. So, with that being said, let's start with our first second round stud. I put Pele Larson, the shooting guard from Arizona, as one of our potential guys. He's in that range, about the 45-50 range. And what I like about him, and obviously this isn't a bias towards Arizona because I like Pele, but I also didn't know where he was going to be viewed at during this process. And during the combine, he played really well. They gave him, he kind of showed what he was good at, and what he's good at. He's a good all around player. Like when I imagine a guy like Pele Larson, I kind of see a little bit of Bogdanovich like in his game. He's good off the he's good off the dribble as a secondary pick and roll ball handler. Great catch and shoot threat. He loves to get out in transition, like he'll leak out and cherry pick. Super nice, and I think in our potential system, he can do all those things that we would ask for in Mike Brown's system. And he would be kind of like that glue guy who does a little bit of everything. And he gives us good size at the guard/wing position that we've kind of been missing because we're a little bit small on that end. So if we ended up drafting him at 45, I would not be upset. I don't know how you feel about that at all.
Yeah, the way you're describing it, it sounds like he would be a great pick. Especially at 45. Like he does kind of fit that Monty McNair, style that we've seen him pick. And I, yeah, I love the comparison of like Bogdan Bogdanovic, because that was kind of what I was thinking as you were describing him. And I've talked about how I would love to bring Bogey back. So
Exactly.
if you can get a Bogey-esque player in the system, I think it would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and I kind of the more I watched, I know I rewatched some of these guys' highlights and stuff like that. What makes them special and where they're weak at. Um, I just think like in our offense, with the way that we run and guys can just get open, he's capable of hitting those kind of shots, and he could work. He can learn a lot from playing alongside guys like Domas in the pick and roll. So I think he would be a good fit here. And I did. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but he
No,
might
you're good.
also learn behind a guy like Kevin Herter in terms of just creating so much separation coming off of a pick and roll. And
Mhm.
that, like, if we still have Kevin at that point, that could be something scary for this kid going forward.
Yeah, and he does have a sneaky level of athleticism to him. Like he has a nice little burst off the first step, and he's able to get up and play above the rim. So and he just hustles. Like I love the effort he puts in. So I'd be okay with him. I also did the fit out of 10, and I give him an 8 just because obviously there's weaknesses that like there's a reason he's a second round guy. Um, but I would love him at this pick if we ended up with him. Another guy I'd be totally okay with going at 45 would be Justin Edwards, the shooting guard from Kentucky. Um, he's a little bit more of a project player, but he was super highly touted, a 5-star athlete, one of the best players of his class coming out of high school. And he just has that like prototypical wing size, good wingspan, good hustle on defense. Like he loves getting in guys' faces and he loves jumping into passing lanes. He's kind of like he's like that great glue guy who's just like, who wants the team to succeed. And he likes making the right play. He's a good passer. He's awesome at rebounding. He likes to attack the offensive glass. So I could see him coming in and just being like that high effort guy right out off the bench who could provide a little bit of punch. Now, where he struggles is he's athletic, but he doesn't have that initial like half court burst where he can create for himself and just blow by a guy. He's more of an off ball guy who can cut. He's looking to take possessions off of like a DHO. Like he'd be really good off of a DHO and he'll just attack the basket. He loves to get inside, and his track record is not a reliable shooter, but he has a good stroke, and it's something that I just think with more time can translate. Um, I really liked him. Like just when I saw what I saw on his tape, I just really like the effort he put in. He wants to win so bad. You can just see it in some of these guys that just like play hard just because they want to win. And I think under Mike Brown's system, he could be nurtured correctly.
That part.
Yeah, so my comparison for him would be like Andrew Wiggins-esque in terms of just the all-around guy who's a nice lengthy wing who can make good plays on offense and defense. If his shooting ends up, improving, he's going to be a good player, like for sure.
Yeah, I did know about this guy, and I would love to see him in the Kings system for the sole reason of just being with Mike and like what Mike could do for him. I really think a lot of those weaknesses might not be weaknesses in a few years if he develops correctly, if everything is taken correctly. But yeah, I think he'd be a great fit.
Yeah, and I just think he has good size too. Again, it's funny because the last guy I'm going to talk about is a little on the smaller side, but like the main thing I'm going for here is like positional versatility, a guy who can play multiple positions, who can guard multiple positions. That's something we need a little bit more of, and I think getting a bigger guy who's athletic enough and competitive enough would be super helpful. So those are my first two in terms of my second round studs. I have a few more guys listed. I have a whole list for each positions, but by the end, when we get closer to the draft, I'm gonna do just a straight up big board ranking from I think my top 20 players, 20 down, same style. So you guys kind of have an idea of where I had these guys originally. So let's go to our first fringe favorite, and that would be Harrison Ingram, the forward from North Carolina. Now, this guy, good pedigree that comes with him. He originally went to Stanford, transferred over to North Carolina, and last year he was an awesome shooter. Now, that wasn't always the case. He needs to prove that he can shoot the ball consistently. but he just does all the little things that you ask for from a role player, and he has good size, and like he has great strength to him. You can see there he's 230 pounds. Like he has an NBA body. And for his size, he's an excellent rebounder, and he's able to push the ball up the court, and he has good instincts when it comes to passing, and he plays great defense. So I could see him being a nice backup wing off the bench who can contribute and hit tough shots and just keep the ball moving and just make all the right plays. If I had to do a comparison for him, I would actually comp him more like Sadiq Bey / Josh Hart. Um, just because when you watch this tape, he does like all those little things, but he also has this like that wing body type, and he has all the traits of like a Sadiq Bey, but he makes those hustle plays like a Josh Hart. I'd really like him on our team. He's all, he switches. He's really good at switching on defense. So I think if we were to pair him with a guy like Keegan and Keon at the same time, like that would be a nice little trio of defense right there.
I when I've watched this guy before, he's actually kind of shown me flashes of Marvin Bagley, believe it or not. And that I've like, if I'm being honest, like a always healthy, always ready to work version of Marvin Bagley on this Kings team would be like the putting on the icing on the cake.
Mhm.
Like that's really a lot of what this team's missing is a true like power forward to pair with Domas.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if Harrison could develop into maybe that style of player to fit Domas really well.
I think the only thing with him, with Harrison, at the combine, he tested a little shorter than expected.
Yeah.
He's going to be 6'7" in shoes, but he was more of a 6'5" without shoes. So for me, it's going to be like he could play the 4 because he has the strength to do it. So that, I think if you pair him with Keegan, I think that's where they provide good switchability. But I mean, when it comes to like the whole, he's available and he's just, when you with these older guys, they just have the experience. And obviously North Carolina did really well, made it pretty far in the March Madness this year. So it'll be interesting. I mean, he's a fringe guy because he started in this process. He was more of a second round talent, but he had a really good combine. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes, because there is a chance he could still fall depending on how workouts go and stuff like that. So that's the problem with him. Like with these fringe guys, there's a world where they could fall to us in the second round, but we're not going to take him, unfortunately, in the first round. It's just a little too high at 13.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you kind of see could you kind of see like a comparison of like a what was his name? Shoot. I just had it. He used to be on the Kings. Scalabiciere.
I could see that. He's not as lanky.
No.
But I think his skill set is more of like wing versus big, if that makes sense.
I was almost, that's fair. I was almost thinking from the aspect of like the do it all kind of player where like, he'll just put in those all effort plays.
That's a good point. I like that. Yeah. I could see that too. I think he is the kind of guy that does those things. He'd be a fan favorite in my opinion. I think he would just come in and make, I think he'd be like what a guy like people thought Justin Jackson was going to be, only like coming out of North Carolina, only with like a much more NBA ready body, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a guy that kind of fits that Marvin Bagley-esque, Scalabiciere-esque style is Bobby Klintman. He played in Sweden this past season, but he also was in the NBA draft last year, coming out of Wake Forest. He was kind of one of my guys going into the draft at our 24 spot, where I was like, oh, I'd totally be okay taking a guy like this, because like he is your prototypical NBA forward in terms of what you want for the future. He's got good size, good wingspan. The only thing with him is he could fill out a little bit more, only coming in at 212. But like the traits that he has is like kind of like that do it all guy, master of none type thing. He's really good at shot blocking, but he's also like just a tiny bit flat footed, so he can get burned, but he does have good recovery speed. He has just like an overall good feel for the game. So like he's able to go coast to coast. He's a good ball handler. He makes good passes. He can swing the ball on a rope across the across the court in the half court. Um, where I see him is like if we paired him next to Keegan and Domas, I could just see a world where he's able to spread the floor. His shot's a little inconsistent, but it's fluid and smooth, and I think it's something that like it is translatable. Um, but like I said, he lacks a little bit of burst, but again, he has good decision making. So I think that if he finds a consistent shot, he'd be a legit threat in the league. And some of these guys, in this draft class, there's just a lot of foreign players or a lot of team guys playing in the European League, Australia, France, all that fun stuff, right? Like there's going to be a lot more unknown guys that we don't get the same level of tape on as we do with some of these guys in college. But he looks good. When I watch him on tape, he looks like an NBA player. He plays like an NBA player. I just think that like he would give us that kind of size that we've been lacking, and also that at the rim protection that we've been missing for a guy like his size.
Yeah, and I think especially too, one of your strengths on there that you have listed is that ability to go coast to coast after a defensive rebound, and I think that's huge for this Kings system too. And I think it's almost slept on that, from the point of view that the Kings are at their best when they get a rebound or they inbound the ball quickly and they're moving down the court, and you don't let the other team set up defensively. And what Bobby could bring there is like when he gets a defensive rebound, you're pushing that ball like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is quick, everything is fast. And, it's that kind of thing could be really effective for us.
Yeah, especially for a guy that size. And again, like I see a world with our defense, he could be a great help side defender and contest shots. Like there's tape of guys like kind of getting their first step on them, and he just reacts and recovers at the rim. And I'm just like, this is nice. Like I wish we had a guy who could do the kind of things that he does. So
Impressive.
he's like the most realist definition of like a fringe first rounder, like a guy who like there's no one trait that he's like supremely excellent at, but he does a lot of the little things well. And I think he'd be higher up if if people believed in his shot a little bit more. But it's something he likes to do and it's something he's working on. So I can see it translating. He's still young enough to make this work. So if I think he's going to go in the first round, but if he ended up falling to us in the second round, I'd be so excited to take him.
Did he so you said he was in the draft last year. He didn't get drafted?
So he entered the draft and then he backed out and decided to play overseas for the Swedish league.
Gotcha.
And I think he realized he was going to fall out of the first round. So by the time this was all said and done, so instead of going back to Wake Forest, he went over and played overseas. So
that's a good adjustment. Good move.
Yes. My comparison for him would be like Trey Lyles mixed with DeAndre Hunter, because of like Trey Lyles' offensive ability versus DeAndre Hunter's like defensive ability. Maybe not to DeAndre Hunter's level, because DeAndre Hunter is a bigger physical player, but that's something he could grow into. And I think like if you paired Bobby, he could play a small ball five very much like Trey. So if you put Trey, Keegan, and Bobby out there, it'd be a very interesting trio out there, in my opinion. So I liked him a lot going into this. So now we go to our ideal targets. Thank you, by the way. My ideal target who is going to be in this range. So I have at least 5 guys in here, but I took 2 of my favorites. And this kid, Tijane Saloon, he's an 18-year-old. He plays in France. He plays for Cholet. When you like watch his film, he just looks like the biggest, longest dude on the court. And he plays like an NBA player. Like he's lauded for his defense, but he's only 18 years old. He has a lot of project to him. But he's going to be a top 14 pick, a lottery pick. And when you watch him play, he's taking sidestep threes. He's able to make passes along the perimeter, but he's also like a lob threat, and he's unafraid. Like I watched this kid play. He looks really nice. And if we paired him, he'd be a true 4 next to Keegan Murray. And he would also provide us that size next to Domas that would like, he could switch on anybody. He could literally guard all 5 positions if he wanted to. He's really good at getting into the passing lanes, and on one-on-one situations he can get burned a little bit because he's still trying to figure out his footing. But that's also like a youth thing. I think that's something he can hone and tune in over time, especially with a defensive-minded coach like Mike Brown. Oh, like I watched this guy. If you haven't yet, check out some of his film. It's really really nice. And for me, like obviously the weakness is he has a good looking shot, but the efficiency hasn't been there yet. Like he's enjoying the best shooting season of his young career right now, and he's making a big impact in the playoffs that they're in right now. Um, so I can see all the tools that he has translating, and he's not afraid to handle the ball, especially in transition. He has a nice handle, but in the half court, that still needs work. But he wouldn't be asked to do that in Sacramento, and that's the thing. He can just move around. He could be almost like the Aaron Gordon lob guy in certain spots, and then he can space the floor. So I like his attitude when he plays. I like the effort and hustle he plays with on both sides of the ball, and like he could be like super special if his upside is met, in my opinion.
It's crazy. I've never even actually heard of this guy, but the way you describe him, like that would be. He sounds like an awesome pick for us, honestly.
Like he's equal project, equal like you could start him right away because of the experience that he has already. Um, and he's only got like he has the potential. Like I just like he's still only 212 pounds. He's still going to grow into his body a little bit, and that's something that like the Kings haven't really taken a project player like this before. Not since Fox. Like when when you're getting a guy at 19, like we've gotten guys who can step in now, but I think he's kind of like a mix of both, where he could, in theory, step into this system, but also you can give him time to grow, and he would still make an impact. So if I couldn't find like when I watch him play, I couldn't think of anybody who really like moves like him, but like defensively, he has the tools to be like a Jonathan Isaac style player. Um, and he would be a great replacement for HB, in my opinion. I think in this particular system, I think he'd be awesome. Now, my favorite guy. I was thinking to myself going into this, I was like, am I gonna pick my favorite guy? Or did I want to save that for the end? But I want to let you guys know where I'm feeling right now. And my favorite prospect so far has been Devin Carter, the guard from Providence. Now, he was a junior. He's 22 years old. He's 6'3", but he has a 6'9" wingspan, and he has a nice weight to him, 193 pounds. This guy is like the definition of like he's got that dog in him. Like he's improved. He started in South Carolina, transferred over to Providence, and he enjoyed the best season of his career. He averaged like 19 points. And he's 6'3", but he averaged 8.5 rebounds a game. Like this dude is not afraid to get down. He's not afraid to lock anybody up. And you watch his defensive film, that's what really stuck out to me the most, was like this guy's not letting anyone get by him. Like you're watching, like it reminded me of watching like Davion Mitchell tape coming out of Baylor. And I'm like, this dude's blocking guys. Like he's great on help defense. Like he's in the passing lanes. Like he's just pesky. And on the offensive side, he has a little bit of like Tyrese Halliburton to him, where he has an ugly looking shot, but it's effective and it works. He makes tough shots, and he also has just like that takeover ability where this dude scores 8 or 9 points in a row, and he also steals the ball 2 or 3 times just to seal the deal. And he's done this against good competition in the Big East. And I look at a guy like, okay, he could be a Malik Monk replacement if we needed him to be, or he could play alongside Malik Monk or De'Aaron Fox or Keon Ellis. And like I could imagine just Devin Carter and Keon Ellis just locking dudes down when Fox is off the court. And he tested really well in terms of he was tied for the highest vertical leap in this draft, but his natural like first step isn't the greatest, but he converts tough layups because he's able to contort his body and make contested shots. But as a catch and shoot guy, he's so good. And like for me, he's like a Malik Monk, Davion Mitchell replacement. If we wanted to go in that direction, I could just see him fitting so well on this team.
I'm surprised Bronny's not in your top.
he was totally my favorite guard. I think he's going to go number 1. I think Bronny was funny because like he was talked about a lot as out the second day he had like 13 points. Everyone's like, oh, he had a great second day. And I'm like, yay. Like, it's fine. I feel bad for Bronny because like there's too much pressure on him.
So much.
And Devin Carter and him went up against each other, and there was a nice little matchup here. But I think for me with Devin Carter, like he's almost like if I had to make a comparison, I didn't want to do Keon because I see a lot of Keon in him, but he's more of like a Derek White, Bruce Brown style guy who's physical and able to get up on defense and just lock anybody up. And he's not like if he was on this team, he'd be a fan favorite for sure. That's just how I feel. So if you haven't seen his tape, go ahead and check it out because you're watching a guy who's like a true difference maker. And on like the top of the like at where we're at 13, all those guards like Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, like those guys who people are who they like the most are going to most likely be off of our range by then. And Devin Carter, if he's the guy we end up picking, like I'm going to be ecstatic. And this kind of falls into Monty McNair's, ballpark of like, we're going to draft an experienced veteran guard who can control an offense and make plays on defense. That's been 3 out of his 4 draft picks. So it'll be very interesting to see where that direction goes. But for me, this would be my top guy for sure. So that was my list so far. That was my preliminary post combine list. And for those who were listening, I probably should have said this at the beginning. For those who are listening, I did put that whole thing up on video. So if you want to check it out on YouTube, it's all right there for you to see. I labeled strengths and weaknesses, all that fun jazz. But yeah, those would be my guys to start. And there's quite a bit more guys that I would consider, but I also want to see who the Kings bring in for their pro days. Like who's going to be doing their workouts, like who's going to make some noise as the draft season moves forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it definitely will. And we're a little over a month away from the draft. So we're starting to really get into the draft season, especially as the season, the NBA season starts to kind of come to a close. I can't believe that we're already coming up on the finals.
Seriously.
But just a quick update for you. Our listeners probably already know, but the Pacers and Celtics just went to OT.
Wow. Awesome game one.
Yeah, the Pacers were up by 3 with about 8 seconds left. And I guess Jaylen Brown hit an insane last second or close to last second shot and tied it up. And then Tyrese threw up some garbage and it didn't go in. So OT.
OT, baby. All right. Well, then let's get out of here so we can check that out. Did you have any final thoughts before we head out of here?
You never cease to amaze me with your draft depth. Like, it's impressive.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it. Just wait. We're a month away. I got a lot of work to do, so we'll see what happens. All right. With that being said, this was episode 43 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on our social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook, all that fun jazz. All the links to the description of each of those all the links are in the description for each of those. And for those who want to check out our pretty faces on video, come find us on YouTube, Behind the Back podcast. We're there. We got a lot of fun content there. For those audio listeners, please like, rate, review the show. For those who are on YouTube, like, subscribe, and follow. Please, that'd be great. We really appreciate it. We want to grow this show, and we're thankful for you guys. So I'm Marcos Conegron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
We love y'all. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.